So for those of you that have been following my channel for any length of time, you know that I love birth and I love birth stories, and you may also know that I just had a little one myself. So today I'm just going to share some of my story and throw out some tips and information in case you are looking for encouragement or help or whatever it is that you tuned into this video for. So the first things that you should know about my birth experience is that this was my second birth. So I have a little boy. He was about 20 months old when my second one was born. And so I'm going into this with a little bit of experience and kind of like, this is how things went before, this is my goals for this next one. That being said, the second thing you should know is that the first delivery was with an OBGYN, and I did end up with a pretty significant episiotomy. And one of my big goals with this birth was to make sure that that didn't happen again, because the recovery was pretty tough. So in making that decision and all the things that you consider, I decided to go with a midwife for this birth. And I just felt like the chances of interventions were a little bit lower with a midwife. By interventions, I mean things like C-sections, episiotomy, use of forceps, having to induce and things like that. So just a little lower chances of that when you use a midwife. So I found a midwife. I was planning to deliver at the hospital. But then here's the third thing you should know about my birth. This is right in the middle of coronavirus, and so there was a lot of factors that went into our decision. We were due end of April, middle of April, I guess. And this is here in Michigan. There is a lot going on with coronavirus and a lot of unknowns. Moms are wearing masks during delivery. There is very limited visitors. We can have one support person and also a doula, which is really great. But that's pretty much it. No visitors in the hospital. At this particular hospital, you would change rooms. You would deliver in one room and then you would transfer to another room for recovery, which I just felt like there was a little more exposure to germs. The nursing staff are pretty much on one floor, but still, like, I just didn't feel comfortable with it. And you want to feel really comfortable going into birth. I feel like this is important to make sure that things progress as they need to, because the more you're anxious and nervous, sometimes that can actually slow down the process of labor. And I did not want that to happen. So here we are at 37 weeks-ish. We decided to have a home birth. Thankfully, the midwives we were planning to deliver with at the hospital were able to actually follow us through a private practice and deliver with us at home. So if you're local, Michigan Born and Raised is the name of the company. They were awesome. The midwives were great. The assistant/doula that works with them was great. Just the whole experience was phenomenal. So just a little plug for them. Here, let's get into what actually happened on that day of my son's birth. In the morning, around 3:30 in the morning, I started to feel like maybe I was having contractions. These are what I call like happy contractions, because they really don't hurt and they're really exciting because you know that birth is probably right around the corner. So I had been having a lot of Braxton Hicks, but this just felt a little bit different and they seemed to be a little more regular. So I quick downloaded an app on my phone. Thank goodness for technology, right? And started timing them, and sure enough, they were like about 5 to 7 minutes apart. So even though like 5 to 7 minutes seems like, wow, those are really close together, the intensity was not there. They were not lasting a full minute, so I knew I had probably some time. So I decided to try to get some rest, just in case this was a long labor. I wanted to make sure I was as rested as possible going into it. Although, if you've ever been through this experience before, you know that it is super hard to sleep when you're so excited, especially in those first few hours where like it's new, exciting, and things are happening and you're thinking about all the things you want to do and get done before you deliver. So I did lay in bed. I tried to rest, but I was not able to sleep. So shortly after my contractions started, I actually had like a lot of like arousal and desire, so I was like, well, let's just make this happen. That sometimes helps speed up labor. So I woke my husband up, not telling him I was in labor, but just like, hey, you know, you want to fool around? And of course he was up for it, knowing that following birth things are going to be a lot different. So we took advantage of that moment. More than you want to know probably, but I did not feel up to having full penetration and orgasm and all that, but of course there are other things that we could do. So did that. That seemed to actually like make things become more regular, I guess, contractions, but still not very intense. So So I didn't tell my husband. I let him go back to sleep. I laid in bed till about 6:30 when I decided it was super important that I get up and clean the toilets. Having a home birth, like, people are going to be in my house. Just wanted to make sure my toilets were clean, right? So I did that, started to like pack bags for my toddler to be able to go to our prearranged location for him, and just kind of getting things in order around the house. Everyone else woke up. We got my son to my sister's house, and I shared the news obviously with my husband and the midwives at that point and said, hey, like, I'm in labor, I think it's going to be today. So everyone's getting excited. My husband is working from home because of coronavirus, and so he just kept on with his plan. The beauty of delivering at home is that you could work from home, and he could stop at any point and be with me if things started to get intense and he needed to call it a day. So I was hoping things were going to progress faster. My first labor was about like 12 hours from like very first contraction to delivery, so I was really hopeful things would go faster. But as the day went on, it didn't really seem like things were getting any more intense. I went out for a walk. I made enchiladas for lunch. I was up and moving. I did some bouncing on the exercise ball. But just things kept regular, but not really getting more intense. So I decided in the afternoon I should probably lay down and rest, because maybe this was going to be kind of longer than I had originally planned. So I did try to rest, and this is when contractions did start to get more intense, but I would kind of doze off between contractions. So after that, I called the midwife, and I was like, I don't know, like, contractions are still like 5 to 7 minutes apart, and what do you recommend? So she said, you know, lay down, bring one on your side and bring one knee up towards your chest, and a lot of times this helps things progress for women. So I had just got done resting, so I was like, well, maybe I'll try some sitting on the exercise ball and bouncing a little bit. Turned on the show we had been watching and just kind of chilling there. And I went from sitting and bouncing to like a kneeling position and leaning over the exercise ball. And this is when contractions did really start to intensify. It's weird because in that moment you don't notice, but yes, definitely they were harder to like talk through. I wanted it quiet. I even started at one point like pausing the show I was watching because it just felt too distracting and chaotic to do contractions and that. So this is when we touched base with the midwife again, and she was like, yeah, sounds like things are getting more intense. Are you sure you don't want us to come? And of course I'm like, no, I think things are fine. My husband's like, no, I think we should start thinking about you guys coming. And the midwives had the same idea because they started packing their bags. The one lives a little bit further away. She even started heading our way, which was a good thing because shortly after that, I did lay on the couch in that position she suggested, and my water broke. Called the midwives back, and they were like, well, if your water broke, we are very close to delivery. So between contractions, me and my husband made our way to our bedroom. That is where we had decided we wanted to deliver. And it was a good thing that we did, because from that point on, things were really, really intense. Like squeezing husband's hand during contractions, not wanting any movement, really uncomfortable. One thing that I did a lot of with this labor and delivery was when I would start to feel pain and my yelling I wasn't really yelling, but like I was trying to moan because I know that's better, but when I would start to turn into a yell, I started doing like a horse lips, which a lot of birth people recommend this, and it was like, it's like a, so as you exhale during contractions, you go instead of like, instead of yelling. So I was doing a lot of that. That was definitely helping. And the midwife checked when they arrived, and they started like setting up the room, but they wanted to check if that was okay with me, and I was fine with that. And I was at about 9 or 10 centimeters already at that point when they got there. So there was actually 3 staff, if you will, there, 2 midwives, and then a doula / medical assistant there as well. Between them, 2 of them were kind of setting up, and one midwife was attending to me, checking baby's heart rate and my vitals, and then doing something which was amazing and I highly recommend, and that is putting pressure on my sacrum. So she put her hand and just pushed into my sacrum during contractions, and if you've been through contractions or you've read about contractions, you know that they're intense and painful, so you would think like someone pushing on you wouldn't be comfortable, but apparently where my son was in the birth canal, this was super comforting to me. Now, don't get me wrong, it didn't take away my pain, but it definitely helped me manage my contractions. And so at one point, with everybody holding different things, during a contraction, I said, "Nobody move," which apparently was more intense than I thought. I had said it because my husband said everyone just froze in the room. I really just meant the person that was putting pressure on my sacrum, and my husband who was holding my hand. I just didn't want to move. I was comfortable, and that was the best way I could tolerate contractions. Again, things are progressing. I was like, well, it feels like I want to push. So there is a reflex that our body has that will actually like push our babies out for us. And so this is why people with spinal cord injuries can actually deliver babies even if they don't have sensation or muscle control below their waist, and our body just knows what to do. And with my first son, I felt this really strong. Like everyone was bustling around the hospital room, and I was like, I hope you're ready for me to push because my body is pushing, and so I want to help that. But with my son, it wasn't quite that intense, but it definitely felt like he's in a spot and I want to get him out, so I want to start pushing. And the midwives are very centered around, at least in my experience, like, yeah, it's your birth, you do what you feel like your body needs to do. So I was like, is it okay if I start pushing? And my midwife was like, yeah, go for it if you feel like you're ready. So I did start pushing at that point. I remained on my left side, and just at this point I had someone holding up my leg and just kind of opening my pelvic outlet and making room for baby to come out at that point. So with my first, if you've seen that birth story, I pushed for about 30 or 40 minutes. And even though they tell you like it could be just as long or longer with your second, you also hear lots of stories about it's way shorter with your second. So I was like, well then this is going to be better because I prepped better, I did perineal stretching, and I've been like really keeping up with my exercise and doing the dates and the raspberry tea. So in my mind, I kind of thought like this is for sure going to be shorter. So I'm pushing for a while and I'm just thinking, this is not feeling any shorter. So I asked the midwife, like, this baby needs to come out. What do we need to do? I think I even asked her if she could just pull it out at one time, which of course she said no, she could not. So she said, well, why don't we roll to your other side? So the team, and I do mean the team, helped me roll to my right side. It was very little effort on my part. But we did this in between contractions, and this seemed to help because it was only a couple pushes after that. And my son, his head was there, and this is when the contractions get really exciting. Some things that we used that I really think helped was that one of the midwives was holding a mirror so that I could actually see the progress, because I really do think that helped. Like, no, because they keep saying like, oh, we can see his head, but you're like, but it feels like he should be coming out. Where is he? And then, okay, yep, there's his head. He is coming out. So that was helpful. And the other thing that was so helpful was perineal warm compresses. And because one of my big goals was not having an episiotomy, I do have a scar there, so that makes the tissue like a little less elastic than I would want it to be. So me and my midwife had discussed in advance, like, let's try hot compresses. And so she was doing that. She was like just putting them on my perineum. And she was also using her hands to kind of stretch. So with my first birth, it was a lot of this, stretching my perineum, and that hurts really bad. This was still painful, but more comfortable. So she kind of, helped his head come out with those last few pushes. So that was awesome. I will say total, it was still about 30 minutes of pushing, which felt like, what the heck, kind of disappointing. But when we pulled him out and put him on my chest, which is like the best moment, we did skin to skin right away, which was one of my goals, and it was amazing as I thought it would be. The midwives actually said, wow, that's a big baby. And as you may know, he was 9 pounds 3 ounces. So he was a big baby, especially compared to my first birth, which was a 6 pound 15 ounce little boy. Before pregnancy, was about 110 pounds. I'm 5'3". My husband is not a big person. There are no history of big babies. And even though I was giant during my pregnancy, like the pictures show, I was giant. I was still like not thinking I was capable of having a big baby, but he was. So I'm really glad I didn't know that in advance, because it might have messed with my mind maybe a little bit. But he came out healthy, and I am happy to report I had one really small tear. They didn't even end up doing stitches. They just said if I followed some like restrictions, avoided crossing my legs and doing the stairs, that they thought it would heal up just fine. I am now almost 7 weeks postpartum, and at my 6-week checkup, everything is looking good. I feel great. I was ready to start like moving and being more myself around 3 or 4 weeks. So no complaints at all there. So that was an awesome part of my birth story. That was one of my main goals that they definitely made happen. I kind of talked about how during labor and delivery I did some position changes and that I delivered on my side, and this was awesome. There's a very low rate of perineal tearing on your side, and so I actually created a cheat sheet about some of the different ways that you could deliver or manage pain during your labor and delivery. So if you want to check that out, the download is just below in the comments in the description. And so maybe that would be of interest to you, because we did a natural, non-medicated, no interventions, like no episiotomy, no nothing. And if this is something that you are hoping for, this cheat sheet could really help you. So back to like just the fact that I was at home during this birth, some of the things that are different is like they had an hour where it was just me and baby. Obviously once he was crying, and he stayed on my chest that whole time, but they really didn't have to do a lot. They just did the delayed cord clamping so he could get all the blood out of the cord, which is so good for him. He started nursing within that first hour, and they really just like leave that hour for you to bond with baby, my husband to be with us, and just to kind of unwind and unpack everything that has just happened. And then after that, they can do a lot of the things that they do at the hospital. They weigh him, they measure him, they do the vitamin K shot. Sometimes we didn't do, but you can even do this hearing screening right away. Like just a lot of stuff that would happen at the hospital anyways, they were able to do right at our home. So that took about maybe another hour. They were there for like 2 hours after the birth to make sure that I wasn't going to hemorrhage or anything like that, and there was no problems with that. And once we were all stable, they kind of get on their way. We got to do a Zoom call with our family, which is not how we thought we would introduce our son to the world, but it was the next best thing. Did a Zoom call. My sister made French toast for us before she left, and we just kind of snuggled in and went to sleep, because at this point, after everything kind of calmed down, it was around 10 o'clock, and I delivered my son around 7:19, I think was the exact time. So 3:30 was first contraction, 7:19 delivery, and by 11 o'clock we had put our son and his little, snuggled him up, and he put him to bed, and then we went to sleep too. So it was a super relaxing experience, and if you have any interest in a home birth, I would highly recommend it to anyone. And using a midwife is like, for sure, I would never go back. Nothing against OBGYNs, they are great at what they do, but for what I wanted out of my experience, midwives were a perfect fit for us. So just to answer a couple of the common questions that I've been getting, things people want to know about a home birth is it really messy? We did it in our bed. We had prepared by putting like 2 layers of sheets, and you put like a piece of plastic and a pee pad, mattress cover, and all this stuff. And to be honest, like just the like disposable pad under me was pretty much enough to take care of everything. They do change the sheets just for freshness, but it wasn't messy really at all. Our bed is not ruined. It was just very not dramatic or anything. It didn't look crazy scary or anything. So that's one of the questions we get all the time. The other thing is like, is it really chaotic being in your home? It kind of depends on the space that you have, but for us it was super relaxing. The midwives were like, this is your space and we just want to help. But you know, it does get a little crowded sometimes in your bedroom, depending on the size of your bedroom, but they were really good about making sure it was still an environment that I felt really comfortable in. I kind of answered about the tests that they can do. Like, everyone's like, well, what about, like, if you want to do circumcision or the shots and stuff like that? You do talk about that in advance. For us, we had to take our son to the office a couple weeks later to do circumcision because we decided to do that. They did the vitamin K shot right there. The hearing screening happened in our home within that first week. The midwives come back the day after you deliver and kind of check on you and baby and make sure everything is going okay. And they are very accessible to you whenever you need them. So I loved my birth, and if you have any questions about home birth, go ahead and pop those in the comments. I would be happy to answer those. Or if you have just a really great home birth story, and you want to share a few comments about that, put that in the comments below too, because I'm super interested always in birth stories. I am so excited to share. Thanks for sticking with me to the end, and birth is just amazing. So I hope you have an amazing experience as well.